So, my name is Tim Dye. I'm the editor of the Smoke Signals and executive director of the Pontiac Open Museum and the Pontiac Transportation Museum. So today as my usual MO, I'm going to show you a lot of different things about a lot of different things. And hopefully you'll be entertained and learn a few things along the way. And at the end, if anybody has any questions, just feel free to ask. So in 2 days is the 50th anniversary of Neil Armstrong landing on the moon. And so if you've got your July issue and read it thoroughly, you read the story, but I know not everybody has the time to read that, so I wanted to show a few things from that story. Of course, I was 9 years old when that happened, and I remember watching it on TV, and this was the most popular picture of Bill Collins and Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, and that I remember back in the day. So that probably brings back some memories right there. And then another famous image from the moon landing. So to tie that to Pontiac, when the astronauts came back from the moon, they were in quarantine for several weeks. But when they let them out of quarantine, they had a rigorous ticker tape parade scheduled. In one day, they had 3 ticker tape parades, one in New York City, one in Chicago, and one in Los Angeles. All in the same day. And in the one in Chicago, the local Pontiac dealer supplied them with Pontiacs. So you can see from this picture, up in the front Pontiac is like a Bonneville convertible, and then there's a whole row of GTO convertibles. And millions of people came out for this sticker tape parade. So what a great promotional thing for the Pontiac dealers at that time. And then it was no coincidence that 3 weeks later, Pontiac sent this out to the dealers, announcing that there was going to be a new color on the 70 Jets called Orbit Orange. So, no coincidence whatsoever there. And of course, it's a very popular color. It was the 70 version of Carousel Red for the 69s. They needed a kind of an eye-catching bright color. That's a picture you may not have seen. So on the far right here is Bill Collins, not the astronaut, but the engineer at Pontiac, and he actually was the one who named that color. He came to the museum one time, and I got my video camera out, and I interviewed him, and we talked about all kinds of stuff, and then we're like, okay, let's go out to dinner. And then that's when he really starts talking. So then he tells me how that one weekend they sent him home with a stack of records, and that he picked the songs for the 8-track tapes that went in the cars. I'm like, what's a driveline engineer doing picking the songs for the 8-track tapes? But I soon figured out that in his position, or all these guys did a great variety of things. And anyway, that's when he brought up also, oh, by the way, he gave me the prototype, if you want to call it that, or the proof RCA 8-track tape that they sent him to go over. So he donated that, so that's amazing. But anyway, he said he named the color Orbit Orange, and I said, how did you arrive at that? And he said, well, there was so much talk in the news and newspaper about all the moon landing and all the, of course, the lingo that goes along with that. And so it was kind of natural if you think about it. And then on the far left, that's Bill Porter, he comes and speaks once in a while. Great guy. And then, of course, you recognize John DeLorean there. Yep. How many have went and seen the documentary on John DeLorean? I haven't went either, but I've heard it's pretty good. So, Alec Baldwin, through movie magic makeup, actually halfway looks like him. This again is one of the most popular iconic images from the moon, and this is on the December '69 National Geographic. And 6 years later, I would go to work at the Wapakoneta Daily News running the newspaper press there, and that is the home of Neil Armstrong. So this is just a few days before the launch, and I really messed up because in the basement was a pallet of newspapers from the day that he landed on the moon. So anyway, I should have grabbed one. I just wasn't thinking. I was 18 at the time. My collecting sense hadn't fully developed yet. So anyway, then there's this, and one of the things that virtually happens nearly every issue of the magazine is I will be researching a story, and I put out feelers, I call people, I email them, I ask them questions, and there's a certain percentage and nothing comes back. Well, in the case of this story for the Land of the Moon, Pontiac and the Moon, I interviewed a lady who, when she was 16, her family went to Florida and watched the moon landing, and they drove in a Pontiac. And she goes, I have a picture. I'm like, awesome. So she goes home, and her and her husband, Bruce, they start tearing the house apart, looking for this picture. Couldn't find it. So I held off as long as I could, and then 2 days after I turned the magazine into the printer, they found the picture. So anyway, it's their Catalina. They drove from New Jersey to Florida. He worked at a company that had contracts with NASA, so he was very excited to go watch the launch. And when they got down to Cocoa Beach, home of Genie, right? Anyway, he put this sticker. It says #1 moon landing launch observer, or first moon landing launch observer. What a perfect time. I wish I could have showed it in the story. So I think in the August issue, I got it on the bulletin board so you'll at least see it. So I don't think it's there yet, but supposedly, I think later today, this car is going to be in the lobby. This was Don Bucher's 26 Pontiac, and you saw the radiator shell in the lobby. If you've not stopped and read the little sign, that was the beginning of the club, was he was looking for a radiator shell for this car, and that's the beginning of the club. So the current owner, Don doesn't still own it, the current owner is going to be displaying this car. So a lot of history that they are wanting to focus on during this convention. I think that's great. So here's the introduction of the Pontiac in January 1926. This is a great photo. The two gentlemen in the middle on the right is Sloan, who was, I forget what his title was at GM, but he was overall of GM. I don't think they called him president, but just, yeah, the chairman of the board, and whatever, he was the man. And then closer to the Pontiac is A.R. Clancy, and he was general manager of Oakland Motor Car Company at the time. So you got to think it was the Oakland Motor Car Company making Pontiacs at the time. And of course, they brought the Indians in as part of that. And I just wanted to talk about that for a minute because it's interesting how things have changed over time about the Indians and so forth. Because I recently came across this photo, and this is A.R. Clancy. And I found a story in the Detroit newspaper, and after Oakland named the car Pontiac, after Chief Pontiac, and of course they made it very clear that the car was named after the chief, and the hood ornament and so forth, and the advertising all reflected that. They invited him to the West Coast for a ceremony where they honored him to thank him, and made a really big deal. This was a serious event, and everyone was kept out except for the chiefs, and there was probably, I want to say 10 major chiefs, that were there at this ceremony, And they gave, and that's his wife to the right, they gave him and his wife really nice gifts, and we're just so proud that GM had named this car after Chief Pontiac. So just think about how different that is than what we hear today, what's going on. And that's how I always think about it, is you wouldn't name something after someone unless you were proud to have that name on it. So anyway, I don't know where things changed or so forth, but I plan to do more research on this. I was in contact with his grandson. I thought it would be awesome to see if they still had any of those gifts I could get pictures of to see what they gave him and so forth. But it's interesting. And then this is Clancy with his granddaughter. In later years, he retired to Georgia, and he bought his granddaughter a new Pontiac. And this shows the two of them together. So, and then while we're talking about the Chiefs, the Pontiac Oakland Museum in Pontiac, Illinois has kind of become the Chief Pontiac headquarters. And we have a wonderful sign company there in town. And I say this with the utmost respect. I have them kind of trained up on restoring these chief statues. And when I say that, I basically just work with them over time with photographs of original ones, and I'm pretty particular about it. But the gentleman on the right is on the school board in Pontiac, Michigan. And then, of course, I'm there, and then the fellow on the left is over the warehouse. He's the warehouse supervisor for the school system. Well, Pontiac Motor Division gave the school system this chief back in the 50s. And I have other pictures. I think I may have shown them before, so I try not to duplicate too much in my talks. But anyway, over time, as you can see, the chief has met with some disasters. And his feathers are gone. His tomahawk is broke off, which is very common on these. But in addition to that, somebody poured paint all over him. And so they found out that I kind of worked on these, and they go, "Can you restore him?" And I'm like, "Sure." So they raised the money, and I picked him up and took him back. And anyway, at the Diaz Sign Shop in Pontiac, Illinois, the dad is a very great sign painter, old school, with the lettering. He can do the hand lettering on your truck or your window or anywhere. And then the one son is a Corel Draw international champion. And with the shirts that we're going to talk about later that I have here, he helps me design those shirts. And then the other son does the wraps on the big trucks and buses. So between all of them, they got the whole thing covered. But they do an excellent job. They build these feathers from scratch. They build the tomahawk from scratch. And then they put him in a primer just like a car. They do all the body work on him and fix him up. And then this is us right after we delivered. That's my wife Penny. Anyway, we delivered him to the school board meeting room where they meet. And he's now proudly on display at the Pontiac, Michigan School Board. So anyway, we've at one time at the museum I had 5 of them. So I had to take a picture. Now the one on the far right is completely original, and a gentleman paid, just to give you an idea, because I know some of you are going, "What are those worth?" And he paid $10,000 for that at an auction, and I have heard other prices in the 8 range. So if you were to call me and ask me what I thought they were worth, I said, well, if they're all complete with the feathers and tomahawk like that one is, in the 8,000 to 10,000 range, because I'm serious, 90% of them, those two things are gone or broken. So the one in the case is mine that I've had for many, many, many years. And then one of those belongs to the museum. But the last 2 that were done, which are the 2 in the middle, we really got it zeroed in pretty close to. And I think the original one on the far right is kind of aged and gotten darker and so forth. You can kind of tell by looking at it. But anyway, I thought this is highly unusual. I got to get a picture. And the chief is so famous, he has his own manhole covers. in Pontiac, Michigan. Not all of them, but a few of them scattered around town. So I have made some inquiries as to how I can legally acquire one of these animals. And I'm going to let that run its course for a while. So, anyway, I just thought those were really neat. Now last year, I think I introduced you to the biggest chief of all, our 23-foot tall chief, Pontiac statue. I will just quickly tell you the story, because if you were here last year, I gave you the complete story, but the Reader's Digest version is that this came from Harry's on the Hill in Asheville, North Carolina. It was there for 50 years. 1968, the grandfather of the current owner purchased the chief. They all come from the same company. They're made out of fiberglass. If you remember back in the 60s, Phillips 66 had a big push out west, and they had the big cowboys. And then there was, of course, the Paul Bunyans, which a lot of them are getting converted into all kind of things like the Gemini Giant and all these things. Well, there's a lot of people who follow the giants, and there is one guy out of Colorado known as the giant expert. So anyway, what happened was a salesman who was working with a Native American customer at Harry's on the Hill, GMC Buick dealership, sent a text of a derogatory nature to what he thought was his friend, but it went to the customer instead. He immediately got the axe. And then there was a big uproar on the internet from all the Native Americans in North Carolina. The chief has to go. If you don't get rid of the chief, we're going to quit going there. Well, then all the locals who were not Native Americans that grew up with the chief being there were like, well, if you get rid of the chief, I'm not coming to your place anymore. So the woman who's the owner, I called her up. I found out about this. And she was crying on the phone what to do, you know, and so she finally made the decision that the chief had to go. And I said, well, if you want to donate it, I'll give him a good home. So she did. So she called the giant expert. He came and took him down, and which, you know, it's a little tricky doing so. And then this is them tying him down on the trailer. And so she paid to have him taken down and transported to Virginia. This is everybody saying goodbye to the chief, all the employees at the dealership. So, and this is him going down the road. Quite a sight. So anyway, he went to the giant expert guy restores them as well, but he's away in Colorado. He goes, well, I have a friend in Virginia that does it too. So we sent him to Virginia where they restored him. And there's two versions of this. There's what they call a chief, which has a full headdress, which is more of a Western Indian. You know, the chiefs in Chief Pontiac's time really didn't do that, and then more what I call the East. They called it the West back in that time. But anyway, but that was perfect for us because he had one feather, but Chief Pontiac is always depicted with three, so I had them, they made 3 new feathers, and I think we kept the one just as a memento because there was even a story about that. Some college kids stole the feather, and like 25 years later, it showed back up at the dealership. And they put the feather back on the chief. So the feathers, it was great that it was there, so we duplicated those exactly. But so now he's a proper Chief Pontiac where he's got 3 feathers. Just to give you some idea of scale, that's the fellow that restored him. So the museum paid for the restoration. And then the lady paid again for the guy from Colorado to come to Virginia and delivered him to Pontiac, Michigan. And he's now in a warehouse. You can almost see the warehouse from the museum up there. And we're getting paperwork, and we're having to work with the state, the city, and the county, so you can imagine the paperwork to get out. But it looks like sometime this year, he is going to go up where Woodward splits going into Pontiac, Michigan, right there, which is one of the most visible. When you say Dimitri, that's one of the most
prominent locations where everyone can view him throughout the.
Dimitri's a lifelong Pontiac resident or lives in the area. But yeah, that is one of the most prominent places in town. So we're going to put 2 plaques on him. One that talks about the Chief Pontiac and the other about the museum. And so can't say when that's going to happen. We'll put it out on the internet when it does. In the Illinois Museum, we've been getting calls, when's the Chief going up? And so anyway, there's a lot of people interested. And we're going to make it where you can pull your car up and get your picture taken with the Chief. So it'll be a really neat thing. So another thing that developed this last year, and if you saw it in the magazine, and that was a huge story, is that we found the chief, you might call him the chief engineer who developed the bumper for the 68 GTO. And his name's Paul Haynes. And anyway, I found him on Facebook. I don't have time to look at Facebook much, but one night I was just kind of unwinding, and I was reading some post, and a guy made a comment, and he said, "we." And I thought, well, he's almost talking like he had something to do with it. So we got a hold of him, and come to find out he was the man. He was the main guy that developed, he was the man. So anyway, very sharp. He's in his 80s, of course, by now. And he worked at Inland, which was a division of General Motors, and they worked several years on developing that nose, so it was kind of a big deal. And so Paul was almost like, "Where have you been? I've been waiting on you." Nobody had ever contacted him. I couldn't believe it. And so he goes, "Well, I got pictures. I got information." I'm so great. So we worked with him for the story in the magazine, which I was very proud because that was all new material that had never been published before. And this is him on the far right with some of his co-workers. And then this is bumper number 1, right there. What an awesome picture to have bumper number 1. And that was his boss at the time beside him. And then this shows a little bit of the construction, how the bumper was constructed. And he had all these pictures just waiting for someone like me to find him. Anyway, this is in the lobby at Inland, and that is the Motor Trend Car of the Year, a engineering award that they gave out for just specifically the nose. Of course, we're all familiar that Pontiac got the Car of the Year award. Well, on top of that, what you didn't know was that Inland got, for the Endura bumper, the Achievement Award in '68. And Paul still has that. You saw him standing there with it at the beginning when I showed this picture. So he has kind of indicated the museum will end up with this award, so I hope so. I think that's a really neat thing. And that brings up a whole other point I won't get into too much, but where did all of Pontiac's awards go? Where did all those Motor Trend Car of the Year, where did all the other awards that they earned go? Nobody seems to know, so I will keep trying. So here's one of my favorite pieces related to the Endura bumper. This is one Endura bumper kit, and it's a baseball bat and a letter that came in that tube right there and went to the dealers, and the letter tells about how that the salesman and so forth could demonstrate the new Endura bumper. How amazing would that be to walk into the showroom and see the salesman beating on a new car with a baseball bat? So it exactly says that in this letter. So, and then another really rare item they sent out in '69 was this Doubters kit. And this is a really cool piece. It's a box. It's not very thick. And inside there's a hammer, there's a piece of Endura, there's a brochure that shows where all the Endura is on the car, and on the front of that brochure, you see how confident all these people are looking? They know they're just going to tear up that Endura, right? Well, on the picture inside, which I don't have to show you, they're not so confident. And you know, the umbrella and the golf club is all bent up and they're all sad looking and everything. But that is a pretty rare piece and a very interesting piece, but it's all about the endurance. And then this is, I believe, correct me if I got his name wrong, but I think this is Paul Richards. And he was an actor, and he did the commercials for Pontiac for several years. And it's one of my favorite commercials where he comes out and he beats on the car with the crowbar. And what people don't realize is he has emphysema pretty bad. And so by the time he's done beating on that car, he's kind of breathing heavy, which works great for the commercial. It emphasizes how hard he was hitting the car. And he just looks at the camera and says, everything those Pontiac engineers touch turns to gray. And then he throws it down with a big clank so you know it's real, and he walks off. But Pontiac did a lot of other promotional photos as well, some of them not so common like this one here. That guy must have just come from the liquor store. So, and I learned quite a bit from Paul, and this was a time period where GM was starting to sell off some of their assets, and they actually sold off, I don't know that Inland per se sold, but the portion of Inland that did the bumpers, they sold off, and by 1970, McCord had put this ad out, they were making the bumpers. And he said how they were contacting him because they were having issues, some of the same issues he had to work out when they initially started making them. So I really didn't know that, so I thought that was a neat piece of information. And then Paul was also involved in the 73 Grand Am. This is a picture of the very first one. And in case you don't know, all 73 to 75 Grand Ams were made in Pontiac, Michigan, at the home plant. So, and also, as you may or may not know, this particular chemical combination on this bumper didn't hold up quite so well. And there's a lot of stories of people going down the road where they just come off in chunks and hit their windshield. And I've seen a lot of pictures where all you see is the headlights and the grills, and there's no nose there. So, a couple of years ago, just to give you a follow-up too, I think I mentioned that we had this Grand Am donated to the museum, and of course it had no nose on it. This was a 4-door 455 loaded car, I mean very loaded, and you'll notice the painted honeycombs on it. This car had sit for like 30 years without running. Again, I'll just give you the short version. It was part of a deal with a body restoration shop, and they started in on the car, then it got shoved in the corner, never completed, and sat there. So the original owner was Louis Goad, who was vice president of General Motors. And he had, we will be doing some story on him in the magazine in the not too distant future. But this was his, on the invoice, it's got his name and home address instead of a dealer. And I intend to go by that address and try to get some pictures of the car at the address. We'll see how that works out. But anyway, you never know when you knock on somebody's door and want to have a weird request what you're going to get. But anyway, he had quite the career at GM, but one of his big moments was he was over a lot of war production, making airplanes. GM had an airplane division, and they made a lot of airplanes for the war, and Louis Goad was over all that. And he must have done really well, because soon after the war, he was then promoted to vice president of General Motors, and on top of that, then was got put on the board of GM. And so he had, I'm going to outline all that when we get to talking about this in the magazine. And so the car went to his son Tom Goad, which a lot of us know, and again in the magazine we did a complete, after Tom's passing, we did a big story in there about his career at Pontiac. And then when he passed away, it went on to his son, Ted, and he donated it to the museum. And I went and got it, and we put it back together. And now it's running and driving and looking good. And last week I displayed it in Milford, Michigan at POCI chapter show there. So it's a nice car. It was Tom that likes the painted rally or the honeycombs, and I didn't think it looked the best on the car, so I put them back to stock looking. I just think they pop a lot better. But anyway, like I said, it's a really nice car. And just in the way of an update, a few weeks ago I went and had lunch with Jim Wangers. And I had to go to California for my I'm getting old. My granddaughter graduated high school. So we went out there, and come to find out, Jim, where he's staying at, the home he is at, is only 15 miles from where my daughter lives. So Penny and I went and had lunch with him. And I can tell you he's being cared for very well. I think he's doing as well as possible. His long-term memory is quite well, but probably the next day after I left, he forgot I was there. I had a friend come and visit him later, and he didn't remember I was there. So his short-term memory is gone. But like I said, I feel like he's doing well as to be expected, and I'm happy to report that I think they're taking good care of him. So, and then he's in Escondido at a memory loss facility there. So anyway, it was a nice visit we had with him. I'm glad we got to be able to do that. So, besides being the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, of course, it's the 50th anniversary of a couple of cars, iconic Pontiacs. And when I mean the judge, this is Paul Bergstrom's car that he's owned for over 40 years, 69 Judge convertible. And anyway, I just wanted to throw this one. This is kind of a rare shot of a Ram Air 4 race car out of the Tulsa dealership. Gene Eagle is the driver. He lives in Mount Vernon, Missouri now. Really nice guy. So in the magazine, you may have seen, it's taken me 40 years, but I feel like I've collected every piece of Pontiac GTO Judge 69 memorabilia that there is. And I'm happy to be corrected on it, because if you find something I don't have, then I got something else I need to look for. But anyway, some of this stuff is quite rare. Of course, the ads are not always so rare, but this is an early one. You'll notice the car has the white stripe on it. There's 5 of these Judge ads, but you gotta remember this is a mid-year introduction car. So here's the second one that has the white stripe on it. This was a 1.5 pages or 1 2/3 page spread. A lot of times this one was on the inside of the cover, and the cover was a fold out. So then there's this one. So there was a little controversy with this, not this ad, but the one I'm going to show you here. And of course, there's a lot of things you'll notice ain't quite like this. Has a power antenna, and we know you couldn't get a power antenna with a Judge because of the rear spoiler and so forth. And then here's another one, Born Great. And then this one is the one that the controversy was about. It says the Judge, it's justice, man, justice. Well, originally that said the Judge could be bought, but the Bar Association had an issue with that. I don't understand why. Anyway, so they had to change the wording on this to what you see here. So there is 2 versions of this ad. So if you grew up like me with the cereal box that said collect them all on there, if you gotta have them all, you gotta get both of these. So. And then now a little more rare is this is the centerfold spread in Safari magazine, and this is where they introduced the Judge to the readers of Safari magazine. If you're not familiar with Safari, I started a series of stories I'm going to do in the magazine, but from 60 to 71, it went out. If you bought a new Pontiac, you got the Safari magazine, which was like a travel magazine for you to take trips in your Pontiac. But of course, sprinkled in there were some advertisements or messages from the chief engineer and different things like that. So, and what I like the best about the Safari magazine is there's always pictures in there that's nowhere else. Because you know, after you've been in this for years and you see some of those same press release photos over and over, it's really neat to see something different. And then this is an official Judge keychain. I was told by an original owner of a judge that he got this at the dealer at the time he bought his car, so I'm calling it official based on what he told me. And so if you want an original, here's what you're looking for. And then this seems to be a pretty rare piece. News from Pontiac basically was a publication where Pontiac Motor Division gathered a lot of the press information from newspapers, magazines, what they were saying and writing about the cars. They would assemble it in this publication and send it out to the dealers. Well, this particular publication is 100% dedicated to the judge. And it is unusual that it has more color on the cover. That is not normal for these. But anyway, so this is probably a pretty unique piece. And then this is a little, it's not a postcard, I call it an info card. It's probably 6-7 inches long and about 4 inches tall. It's got that picture we're so familiar with on the front side, and on the back it has all the info about the judge. A friend of mine has an uncut sheet of these. So that would be the ultimate rarity for something like this. And then probably one of the most common things to all of us is the judge jacket. And if you got a judge, you got to have one of these to display with your car. And that's a picture from '69 back there on the right. But probably more rare than the jacket itself is this is the official jacket order form. And then you may or may not be able to see it, but on the right side, just below that little safety emblem that's at his hip, there's 2 other jackets you can order, and nobody ever talks about them. But there's a GTO jacket and a Firebird jacket. So there's 3 jackets altogether. The judge one was just, of course, the most popular one. So at some point they reproduced them, but just in the way of quick reference, right here is the quickest way to tell the repo from the original. The one on the right, you see how the loop is filled in at the top? That's the reproduction. On the left is the original. It's a complete circle, a complete loop, and that's your zipper pull. And so that's just the quickest way to tell the repo from the otherwise they look really exact. And then this is a story that came out, and you may not be aware that this jacket got from several organizations great press for its safety. And of course, right off the top of your head, you might think of the reflective stripe that goes down the sleeve, but that's not the only thing, and I didn't know it, but they designed it. Look at the zippers are designed it where when you have your safety belt on, your shoulder belt, it does not interfere with the zippers. So look at how it would go across the judge, patch and on down that way, and you can still get in your pockets without undoing your safety belt. Wow, actually somebody put some thought into this. So, and then the judge record, Paul Revere, the Raiders. I've never seen any sleeve for this. To me, I guess it was not really marketed for the public other than through maybe the dealers. But I never saw a neat sleeve with like a judge on it. Seems like there ought to be. And all I've ever seen is just a white plain sleeve for these. But these are pretty consistent. When one comes up on eBay, they usually go in the $300 to $325 range. So, and that's a 45, by the way. And then the museum got a good portion. When Jim left his office, they boxed it up and sent most of it to the museum. And I went through a fair amount of it, but I can't say I completely really absorbed what all is there. But one of the things I found, and I wish it wasn't just a copy, but this is a really cool picture of Jim in the middle with Paul Revere and the Raiders. And I would guess this, I interviewed Paul Revere a long time ago, and he said this commercial was shot outside of Reno, so I'm guessing this was probably during the commercial shoot that this picture was taken. But I think this is a picture you don't see. And then here's another kind of rare picture from a Pontiac publication. And this is again showing Paul Revere and the Raiders and with a judge. And what's kind of sad for us today is, you know, I just told you what those records go for. Well, this is an employee magazine called Tempo that went out to the factory workers. Pontiac had a problem. They had a bunch of records to get rid of. And they were telling employees to come get them. So in '69, it says, employees or family members wishing to have a free copy of any of these records may receive one by sending a letter or postcard request. So there you go, they had free ones to give away. And then this is one of my favorite brochures from the 60s. I call it the High Performance 69 brochure. And it's got, of course, a lot about the judge in it. And then this is the press release. And this is a couple of the press release photos dated December 19th, 1968. Here's another press release photo that was sent out at the time. And then we start to get a little more rare here. These are the posters you can send off for like 35. It might have been 40 cents by 69. And they come to you in a tube, and the quantity of them varied. There was usually 3, 4, 5. By 70 was the last year, and I think there was only 3 in 70. But there was a fact sheet, you might call it, and a book cover. And sometimes there was a sticker, like in '66, there was the Tom McCann shoe sticker. It was kind of with it, but so this is a poster. So this is kind of rare to find in good shape like this one. And then this is rare too. This is the letter and the insert that went in the dealer album. So again, it's a mid-year introduction. Pontiac sent this to the dealers, so depending on how conscientious the service manager or the sales manager, it was, this may or may not have been added to your dealer album. So if you buy a '69 dealer album thinking that that's 100% in there, you better check before you buy it, because you might be disappointed. And again, it's not the guy selling it to you ripping you off. It was back in the day, it come in an envelope to the dealer. He might have threw it in the trash, threw it in his desk. It may have never got put in the dealer album. So that's a good thing to look for. It definitely adds to the value of the dealer album. And now we're getting into some really, really rare. This was a set in a tube sent to dealers for the showroom. And this is I'll show you what was in it. This poster it was in it, which this poster is probably 7 feet, 8 feet tall, 7 feet at least, and it's 5 feet wide. It might be 8 feet by 5 feet, about like a sheet of plywood. And it comes in 2 pieces, because it's so big they couldn't print it all in one piece. And so this has 2 bottoms to it, basically. So if you had a smaller window, the bottom half could have had this. So this is much shorter than the bottom half here. That way you could get it on in your window. So in this tube, there's 3 pieces associated with this poster. These 2 pieces, and then this 3rd piece for the bottom. Then the other poster is this one. And this is the same size as half of the other poster. So this is 5 feet wide by probably 3.5 feet tall. This is a huge, on really heavy stock. And this is what took me the longest to acquire for my collection, and this one is in mint shape while it was in that tube. So the finding one, a complete set like this is really tough. But and then here's a photo that this is from that photo shoot where we see so often that young man wearing the judge, and they used it in so many pieces what I showed you. But this one shows kind of the background where they were at. And his head is turned slightly different in this photo. But I thought it was neat to see this because they black it all out and you rarely see what the background looks like. And then this one just popped up on the internet a while back. It's like a promotional dealership, and to me it's kind of a takeoff of the Bonnie and Clyde commercial they had in '68. You may remember that. So anyway, with the police and the judge and so forth. And then in our conversation with Jim Wangers, I asked him about several things, and one of them I asked about was this piece, and he still has that. He has kept that. It means a lot to him. So he still has this piece. And I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he still has his '69 Judge. He has sold a lot of the other cars off, but I don't think he sold his '69 Judge. So I think anything to do with the '69 Judge is near and dear to him. So, and then this is a home photo that I came across, and I love home photos because they're one of one. You know, they're one of a kind. And so this is Arnie Beswick, and obviously at the pit somewhere, we don't know where, working on a super judge. Love pictures like this. And then you may or may not know, but I've been writing for several years in the smoke signals that I acquired Tom Goad's collection of his papers from his office. And one of the papers in there was this handwritten list of the ad hoc committee that John Lori put together, which created the judge and the Trans Am. And so you got Russ G, who, and what's neat about this is it tells their title as well. And it says assistant motor engineer, and he worked too at the proving grounds a lot. And then Ben Harrison, he was a senior product engineer. And then Herb Adams on there. William Hoagland, Bill, he's even got the name they go by on the left. He's the accountant bean counter of the group, which he would, of course, go on to be general manager of Pontiac. And then there's two people there you may not be so familiar with, and that's Dave Wood, the sales analyst, and Jim Graham, who was marketing director. And then if we go on, of course, you got Jim Wangers, and then you got Bill Collins, who I showed you earlier. So let's back up a minute. I do not have a picture of Dave Wood. So if anybody has a picture of Dave, I really, really want that. And just recently, I was able to acquire from his widow, probably, I went from 0 to 60. I got 60 pictures of Jim Graham as marketing director. And here's one of the pictures. When he was being in marketing, he probably, if you really think about it, now you might think it was really cool to work, say you had a job at the proving grounds, you got to test drive all the cars. That'd be a really cool job. But think about Jim's job. He got to rub shoulders with everybody that was anybody that had, in the promoting side of Pontiac. So here he is, with Burt Reynolds, and like here he is with Cesar Romero. I mean, I have pictures of him with, like the guy that played the Riddler on Batman, and I mean, just everybody. He set up when they did the big introduction of the new cars to the dealers, he set that up. He worked with when they did the shows at like the Chicago Auto Show, Detroit Auto Show, LA Auto Show. He set all those things up. When they shot commercials, he worked with those people shooting the commercials. So he got to work with the actors. So he really had an awesome job. I want to say he passed away in 2006. But again, I am digging into his history, and now that I've got these pictures, at some point we'll be able to do kind of teach everybody more about him. So another one of the awesome cars that we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of course, is the Trans Am this year. And there's a whole lot been printed about how in '63 Pontiac had to get out of racing. But you never hear about how they kind of slipped back in. So by '69 here, they were were paying for some sponsorship and paying for some race cars to be built, and it was not in drag strip, but SCCA racing. And so, in our collection that the museum's been able to acquire, here is the original document that Tom Goad had to sign, and he fibbed a little bit. It says up there, this is to certify that Pontiac Motor Division has produced a minimum of 1,000 identical Pontiac Firebird Trans Ams. We know that didn't happen. But anyway, it's dated 3/1/69. So this was certification paperwork for Pontiac Motor Division to be able to race in SCCA. And this is the live version. This is his signature. This is not a copy, so that's pretty amazing. And then in there's great detail about the engines and about the makeup of the whole car. There's great detail about all the specs for everything. Well, then Pontiac must have had to print it up to send to all the tracks and all the SCCA officials. It's like an identification guide. And in Tom's stuff, I found the actual printing plates from the press that printed these certification packets. And you might recognize this car as the prototype 69 Trans Am, the silver one they debuted at Macachan a few years ago. Does anybody remember that? That silver car that got restored? Prototype, this is it here. So on these plates, it's like an ID guide. It tells about suspension, not just the engine, everything about the car, the spoiler, everything it was like an identification guide on these plates. So, talk about rare stuff. This is awesome. So switching gears here a little bit, I try to cover, I know everybody's not into 69 Judges or Trans Ams. So people kept asking me, what'd you bring to the show? This is what I brought. So knowing the history that they're trying to highlight at the convention this year, I was able to piece together that the 1980 Best of Show car, I knew where it was. So I went and asked the owner if I could bring it to the show, and he said, sure. So what I didn't realize, I was making a bunch of work for myself because that car hadn't probably been touched since 1980. So I spent 5 hours cleaning it up. This is Bob Rabb here with the car. There's another better picture of it. He added a lot of things, of course. Today how a lot of guys will add, like oversized tires to their GTO and add a few little things that aren't quite original. Well, he kind of did that same thing with this car. He actually, I'd never seen him before. You might be familiar with him, but he put little, I think they're polished aluminum little sleeves, or stainless maybe, over the spokes. Because the spokes were painted from the factory, but he added these little to make them look like chrome spoke wheels. And then, of course, he added some lights and some mirrors and a hood ornament that didn't correct, and all that just to make it a really flashy car. And of course, they didn't have white walls back then, not on an Oakland anyway, or a Pontiac. Unusual color combination. I'm pretty sure that's not a factory color combination. Well, anyway, this is a picture I took right before I polished and cleaned and polished, and got it looking as good as I could. But you'll notice if you get up close, it's, you can tell it's aged. It's not bad I'm sure, like I said, it's not been touched for a long time. So anyway, check it out when you go out there. 29s, of course, have the straight 6 and so forth in them. And then that's going back to the museum in Michigan when I leave here with it. So, and then this is kind of an unusual piece. Of course, Union Park Pontiac is a very popular dealership, and this is their newsletter that went out to people who bought a car from them. And the 70 GTOs have just come out, and you'll see a little story down at the bottom. So they sent this out along with this sticker that they did. So that's kind of a rare piece, kind of a takeoff of the Judge sticker, only they call it, in the ads that Pontiac did, it was the Humbler, if you remember. And so that's kind of a neat piece. And then just on a personal level, this is one of my cars, and again, but it's POCI history a little bit. We drove this car to the convention in Irvine, California. What year was that? Anybody remember? 91, 90, somewhere in there? Yeah, 93. Anyway, so we drove on Route 66 out to California, and the kids are in the back and stuff, and all the luggage, that's why it's sitting a little low in the back. But anyway, we sold this car. These are quite rare. It was a package the dealers could buy. This was sent to the dealers for $115. We got the 3-piece rear spoiler, the quarter windows, the Sprint logos, and the stripes, and all that. And you could either have it send a motor town to be put together, or you could do it right at your dealer. And I've only seen like 3 of these. Well, this is what it looked like when we initially had it and drove it to California. But we sold it over time, kind of regretted that. Actually, my wife surprised me, and of all the cars we've had, she missed this one. And so I found it again years later in Coffeyville, Kansas, but the guy wanted way too much and then went downhill. And then we heard it went to Kansas City and was crushed. And so we were really sad. I just couldn't understand a very unique car like this. So anyway, we got a surprise phone call one night from Vern Howard. And he goes, "Tim, get on Craigslist and look in Kansas City." And sure enough, there it was. And it had been traded in with 2 other vehicles to one of them pay-by-the-week dealership, car dealers in Kansas City. And they didn't really know what to do with it because that wasn't their cup of tea. They usually dealt with 5 to 10-year-old cars for so much a week. And so they just put it on Craigslist. So I called him that night and asked how much. He told me, and I said, "I'll be there tomorrow to pick it up." So I drove to Kansas City, and so we got it back. It's worse for the wear. It's still not rusty. It's not. They changed out the motor. It had a 305 originally, and now it's got something else in it. But so that's a future project. But I'm always looking, and one of the set of louvers you see here on the side window have went missing. So I don't ever foresee finding those, but maybe with the 3D printing and that, I can take the other side and have them flip it and make it fit. So anyway, so let's talk a little bit about the museum. I'm sure I get asked a lot about what's going on with the museum. And this is kind of how it started. This is my house in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, and clubs would come all the time to take tours of my house, which I know is not normal, but that's what was going on. And I show this because, you're like, it's kind of a step or natural progression for me to do the museum when you think about this was my home and this is what was going on there. So all I'm doing is kind of making it official, And so we went from that to we moved. This month, we have now been open 8 years in Pontiac, Illinois, at the museum there. So time flies. We have way outgrown this facility. We do not intend to leave there, although the city owns the building, and you may have seen that the mayor announced his retirement. And at the end of this month, he's leaving. So we're not kind of captain of our own ship there to say, So hopefully the new mayor and stuff will be up on tourism like the old one was, and things will just keep going on. But we wanted to prepare and expand for the future. So the opportunity came up in Michigan, Pontiac, Michigan, for us to expand our facility, and we have like 10,000 square feet in Illinois, and this facility is 55,000 square feet.
Right on.
So, and we have some land. We have 0 land in Illinois, so that's helpful. This is a donated 35 Pontiac that belongs to the museum. We now have had like 29 cars donated to the museum, and some pretty awesome cars at that. So anyway, ever since we've been getting the building, we've been planning and working on it. This is an artist's rendering or architect's rendering of, we want to bring the front out and make like a showroom and the main entrance there and have a gift shop there. And did you happen to notice the gift shop last night? Did you go to the national parks in Gettysburg? What a gift shop that was. Because I look at museums probably differently than you do. I'm looking at how everything is done. everything, but anyway, they had an amazing gift shop. This is a newer artist rendering we had made, and we are kind of duplicating something we have that I know is amazing in Pontiac, Illinois, and that's that big Route 66 mural. Now, this is not going to be exactly what the mural is going to look like. I just did this as an example, but we are going to have a place there at the end of the museum where you can pull up and have your picture taken, you know, with an awesome mural there. So that's what that's all about. There's another view of that. And to the right there, that is going to be the temporary main entrance, as we're going to do this in phases. So right now we're raising money to complete phase 1, and this is on this end of the building closest to the parking lot, and so that's part of that. So last year, you know, GM came with like 70 plus people for 2 days, and we got an amazing amount of work done, cleaning up and painting and trimming trees and pulling up some carpet. There's a lot more carpet to pull up. This was a school built in '73 with an open concept, so there really was no walls. The only walls there were in the office area, and they were like temporary module type walls that came out pretty easy. So, and then here's the tree trimming going on. It was amazing. They had like a paint crew, they had a yard crew, they had like a cleanup crew, and then they had a food crew, a guy just kind of to cook and feed all of them. And he, a great guy, he had his Pontiac hat on, and he was smiling the whole time. They just had a great time, got tons done. By the time they left, the front of the museum looked like a park. It was amazing how shaggy it was. I'm going to show you an example here in a minute of the change in that. But we had an event there last year, and while I was preparing for that event, a woman called me that lived up there and said she was moving to Chicago. She was having a garage sale, and her dad was an industrial engineer at Pontiac for many years, and she had some of his stuff, and if I wanted, I better get over there and get it because she was going to put it in the garage sale if I didn't. Because she was like leaving the next day. So I was like, okay, I dropped what I did, I drove over there. She had some amazing stuff. I didn't even know what an industrial engineer was, but her dad planned out all the plans. He had to know a lot about a lot of stuff. And he made blueprints that laid out all the machines. It laid out how everything moved through the plant, everything from the railroad sidings. He had to know a tremendous amount of stuff. So I probably got 40 or 50 blueprints from her and pictures of him and then he had his pocket protector, and then she gave that to me, and in pictures he's wearing it. And so that was pretty neat. And his ID badge, his Pontiac ID badge. But in there was from 55 to 84 blueprints of like Plant 8, which was the main assembly plant, and a lot of the other plants there at Pontiac. And among them was the Fierro plant. Well, in a couple weeks later, we were having a big group in Illinois come to the museum of like 250 Fierros. We're coming to our museum. So I sorted out these Fierro ones and laid them out for them guys to see, and this is me kind of talking to them about these blueprints. And they were just amazing. Every detail of every machine and every aisle and everything. And they're huge. Some of these are like 3 feet by 6 feet, or some of them are really big. So this is the event then that we had at the museum, and it was kind of a welcome, just kind of to share with people who cared, to want to come and find out what we were intending to do. And one of the people that came was George DeLorean, and so it was nice to visit with him. And then, I'm not showing this because I'm in it, I'm showing it because it's kind of funny. The TV station come to interview me, and I've had this happen before, and there's usually always 2 of them. Well, there must be budget cuts because now there's no reporter, you just hold your own microphone, and the guy behind the camera, and that's it. And he asks you questions, and you answer them, and you're done. So, we got the cutbacks here. So, and then this was our group of volunteers there at that event. So, and that's a banner we put up in front of the museum. And everybody's saying, when's it going to open? And that banner, it's probably not going to happen this year. It depends on how. We are making progress, but it's going to depend on how the donations come in. So it's all based on that. And then we have people just drive by up there and stop and send me pictures and say, hey, I was there, you know. So it's like, people are excited for it to open. Well, then this year we've had more volunteers come from Chrysler. And you may think that sounds funny, but they're like 4 miles away from the museum. And if I understand, is Jeff Sarek in here? No. He works at Chrysler as an engineer. And he told me that half the people in his department are former GM employees. So as GM's laying them off, Chrysler's picking them up. And so of these people that come over to help us at the museum, most of them is GM employees from there in Pontiac. So anyway, we did more cleanup, more paint. This is a wall in the back of the museum. There's a drop off, and there was a lot of graffiti on that, and they painted over it, and it just looks amazing now, like brand new. This is what was the band room, going to be the theater. It's perfect for the theater. And they were in there pulling up the carpet. And as we're getting prepared to do things in there. So, and then I met this guy who, in the downturn in like 08, lost his job. And he was he worked at an advertising agency as an artist. And now he lost his home, he lost his car, he lost everything. And so what does he do? He sits at this restaurant in downtown Pontiac, Michigan all day, every day, at one of the tables. And this friend of mine told me about it, and I just go down there and I tell him what I want to do, and he draws it for me. And he's like, you know, he's almost like work for food kind, and so I paid him some money, and he's super happy, and I let him do illustrations. And so this is what the theater's going to look like. Amazing. Another angle from the wall in the back. You just had to be there. It's such a transformation. And then here's some of those volunteers from Chrysler. And second from the right is Jeff Sarek. So now we're in their system. He's already talking to me about coming back again, so that's great. And so here's one of the examples. And of course, I haven't put the wood on the front of here yet because until we get closer to opening, we don't need it. But this is what it looks like now. And look at it back then. So, a little bit of a background story for this. When I first started going there was graffiti all over this trash enclosure. And I told my wife, I said, you know, I've never done graffiti, so I went and got some paint and just wrote the county back and put the money in it. It looks like a first grader did it, I know. But anyway, I just was having fun with that because I knew we were going to paint over it eventually. But look how it's all grown over. And anyway, that's just a good example of the changes that are taking place there at the museum. And the car in the front is one of my cars, and it's a really odd car. And it's a 74 Grand Am 4-door, 4-speed. And it's got a POCI rear dual exhaust, tacker gauges, no radio. So the guy that bought it new took pictures of it like the day he brought it home. And there was a block-off plate there for the radio. Well, he had taken that off and put a couple gauges in there. And so I started looking for that block-off plate. It is not easy to find. And so recently, though, Barry Martin, I got to give him a plug, he found one for me. So I'm pretty excited about that. So now this car is 100% complete. And I'm going to be featuring it along with that Lewis Goat car. I think they make quite a pair in the magazine coming up. So not too long ago at the museum, we had a meeting. Of course, we're always trying to get some donors and so forth. Well, on the far left there is John Middlebrook, and then me, of course, and then Mike Losh on the other side of me. So I'm standing there between two former donations. So that's amazing. And then in front of Mike Losh is John McMullen, who was at one time the third largest Pontiac dealer in the country, and he lives up close to the museum. And then Terry Conley is next. He's a former GM engineer. And then on the far right is Mark Thomas, who donated the building to us. So we now own that building. I think in here I got a picture of him. This is one of our fundraising events coming up in Pontiac on the 15th of August. And it's going to be at the Marriott, and this is in conjunction with the Woodward Dream Cruise. So if you're coming to Woodward, you can go online and to the museum's website, PontiacTransportationMuseum.org, and go to this, click on the buttons and get tickets to come to this. It's going to be a meal, auction, fundraiser. So this is one of the things we're doing to raise money. So at that museum up there is going to be everything from Pontiac, buggy company items like the wonderful sleigh we have out here in the lobby. Be sure to check that out. And the buggies, to the old GMC trucks that were made there in Pontiac. And to a car like this, which was our last donation. This was an '89 STE all-wheel drive. One owner, he's 92 years old, donated the car to the museum. So not every car that we get is an amazing, but this car technology-wise was kind of a unique part of Pontiac's history. So, but anyway, a wide scope. So my new friend, the artist, this is a shop we want to put out in the back where the playground used to be. And this is I kind of gave him some ideas and he made these for me. So what we've started now is a buy a brick campaign. And when you buy a brick, of course, you don't get an old brick like this. You get a nice new one with your name and stuff on it. And so, again, you can go to PontiacTransportationMuseum.org and learn all about the buy a brick program we have going on. And then today, you can help us out. I brought some shirts, limited number of shirts. I got 2 designs. We got the Judge 50th anniversary, and you'll notice they got both museums on there. And then we got 69 Trans Ams like the one I'm wearing, t-shirts and work shirts. So Charlie and Dimitri are going to be over there. And by the way, Dimitri Toth, who writes for the Smoke Signals, is here. So if you got any questions for him, and he's on the museum board. So that's Dimitri. Next year, we will be at Pontiac/GM 50 years next year. So his stories are very appropriate because he lived it. So anyway, there's another picture of that. And then lastly, I'm done. This is our big event. This is our biggest fundraiser in Illinois. Our fall show has really been an awesome show. We have a cruise. Last year we had 75 Pontiacs on the cruise. And then the show is the following day. So September 21st, 22nd, come help support the museum, have a lot of fun in the process, and we hope to see some of these many things that we got going on. So is there any questions at this time?
Just hold everybody for a second.
Okay.
After you're finished, we need to make an announcement.
Okay, there's going to be an announcement, sure. Any questions? Yes, sir.
GM put the racing band in '63, but then they built the Tunnel Port 303 for the Trans Am racing. So how did that work? How did they sneak it around the back? Any ideas, word on that?
Dimitri might have tried to keep it. Once you get him wound up,
I get them wound up.
Well, I'm a little bit winded, but to answer your question, I do have a story in the Shadows of Pontiac series that will cover
It's in the next
Tunnel
issue.
Port
Next issue.
history. It's an involved history that, again, the 303 and the 301, which we'll see in the next article, will tell a little bit of the beginnings of the Tunnel Port and the Trans Am road racing, SCCA history. How many more questions can I do with this without keeping it under 2 hours? A little bit winded sometimes, but
All right.
again, can you just revisit that again briefly, and I'll see if I can get back to it. I got off on a tree limb here, and I got off on a branch, and,
We better let Jim.
Go ahead, ask.
Yeah, next.
We probably better wrap this up.
Yeah.
Jim, why don't
I'll have it in the magazine.
Thanks, appreciate it. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. I'm Jim Martin. I'm co-chair of this year's convention. Great to see everybody. Hope everybody's having fun. We have one concern that the hotel has about parking, and we're going to ask you folks to please adhere to what the hotel is asking us to do. Right now, we have a lot of folks that are parked out on this side of the hotel, behind the hotel, and that is reserved for the staff of the hotel. So we're asking.
We need those people.
We need those people bad, because we got a banquet tonight, and we got a banquet on Saturday night, and we got all this other stuff that's going on, that we need their help with. So if you could please,
If you're parked back there,
Clark, please move. This is Tom Wright. Tom is managing the field for us. It's a thankless job. I know everybody's trying to find a place to park close, but please.
yeah, there's general
We're
parking
asking you, general parking is
out by the theater. On the other side of the theater is general parking. There's a huge field. It says a sign that says general parking. If you have a tow vehicle or something like that, please start looking out that way, because it is getting tight in here. The other thing I want to mention, please, if you've got a show car, let's get it on the field. We need to get the show cars out of the parking. That's going to free up parking if we get the show cars out of the general parking areas and get them on the show field. We're ready. We've been ready. I know it took us a lot to get that field, but we're ready. Please there's people out there with green shirts on that will help you park. But if you would get out there, if you've got a car parked in somewhere in the compound, please get it on the show field. That would be very, very helpful.
points judge area. We gotta get the cars out of there except.
And that's the other one. The last one is the points judge area, which is
All
this
in the back.
right here behind right outside here. There's still some cars parked there that are not judging cars. We gotta get everybody out of there for the show tomorrow. So again, if we could get, I know parking's a thing, but if we could get the show cars, I think that will help. If everybody gets the show cars onto the field, that's gonna help open up some parking for regular vehicles. So please help us that way. Thank you very much. Hope you have a great time. Let's go.
Could I have one more minute?
I turned it off, Jack.
One more minute? Yeah. Tim Dye is always one of our most vibrant seminars there. And on behalf of the K.I.T.T Convention Organizing Committee, we wanted to give a certificate of our appreciation for making our on behalf of, I sit on the POCI Board of Directors, on behalf of the POCI Board, we want to express our appreciation for everything Tim has done over the years to preserve and promote the Pontiac legacy.